Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Progress America Unfiltered. We've got a really exciting show for you today. My name's Tyler. I'm here with Rhett, Linda, and Jocelyn, and we are going to talk about the news story that has been heating up the news. Did you get my little pun? Okay, because Paris is burning, and I'm not talking about the iconic Ballroom 1990 documentary. So, Jocelyn, can you tell me what is going on in Paris? I've seen the videos. People are in the streets. What is the need to know?
So the subtext of this show is, what are the French protesting now? And right now, they are upset that Emmanuel Macron is trying to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64, saying that the massive investments in the social infrastructure of the country during COVID have left the coffers depleted, which it's so funny. If you said that to an American, they'd be like, we never had any services anyway. Sounds great. But the French are so upset. We're seeing protests with literally millions of people. Thousands have been arrested. All of the major French unions are coming out to say this is nonviolent. We're working together. We are here to protect not just the French people, not just the French retirees, but the French way of life, which is proudly work-life balanced and so different from anything I think anyone in any class of the United States would relate to. Because here, even the class we think of as like heavily privileged, the CEOs and whatever, we just work all the time. I would argue that workaholicism is America's culture, but the French aren't having any of it.
That's an extremely interesting point, and I have to bring up immediately something that this reminds me of, something that I think Linda brought up in one of our previous shows. So we have been talking on this show a few episodes back. Go find it if you haven't watched it, talking about Republicans and their committed attacks against Social Security and Medicare and the benefits that our seniors have earned. And one thing that I think it was some congressman, Rick someone, there's too many Ricks, but Rick someone said that, some of his constituents were coming up to him and saying that, like, people want to work longer and delay retirement, which sounds like the exact opposite of what's happening in France. So Linda, I would love to hear from you and hear about the ways in which the American people are not handling this like the French.
Yeah, so there are definitely way too many Ricks. This particular one was Georgia Congressman Rick Allen, who claims that people go up to him and say, hey, we want to work longer. Can you just increase the retirement age so that we can work forever? And I don't know if I believe him about that, but it is certainly the case that there's much more of a culture in America that people should keep working, and that Paris is burning because they're trying to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Meanwhile, in America, the full retirement age for Social Security is 67, and Republicans like Allen, like Rick Scott, another Rick, Mitt Romney, Lindsey Graham, they're all talking about raising the retirement age to 70. And so far, at least, nobody seems to be burning anything in the streets about it. Now, if they actually tried to pass it, it was closer, like that could change. But the fact is that we just don't have the same culture in America, and we don't have the same expectations, like especially for younger people, millennials, Gen Z. The media and a lot of Republicans are just saying, well, of course young people aren't going to get the Social Security that we're paying into, that we're earning. Like, doesn't everybody know that? And a lot of people just accept that as reality rather than saying, like, heck no, this is what we're paying into and we're going to demand it.
That's such a good point. And so you were touching on young people and Gen Z, and I want to toss it to Rhett, aka our youngest correspondent on Progress America Unfiltered. So Rhett, what are your thoughts about all of this?
Yeah, Tyler. So I think what Linda is also identifying too is like this continuous approach of particularly Republican, but I will just expand it to like elected officials in general in federal office that just like I think have this idea that young people and people really across all age demographics are going to turn a blind eye to this like continued approach to like really harm the quality of life for so many people. And I think that's evident with like particularly raising the retirement age. Like, I mean, I think that there is like a little bit of a detachment for particularly young people that think, one, not even thinking that far down the line. I mean, like, I'm certainly not thinking that far down the line yet, maybe in a few years, but not right now. But I think it's that same kind of mentality of like, okay, let's have this like quick problem solver, so to speak, in terms of balancing whatever budget that they want to present to their constituents, their donors, etc. But really, it's kicking this can of a problem down the road that is going to be really harmful to people as they get older. And of course, like going after something like Social Security and Medicare that like particularly are so beneficial to the less fortunate, financially speaking, like is so evil, and it's just going to be a continued, I think, approach that we're going to see from them time and time again. And I'm so happy that we're covering that issue here.
So I think one of the conversations that we really have to have now, as we watch public sector services under attack in all wealthy liberal democracies, is how America versus European cultures really developed. European democracies developed in the shadow of these great wars, in the shadow of Soviet occupation. These are people who know what it's like to be oppressed, and they can smell it, and they're very sensitive to it. The French social services, particularly, grew out of these incredibly dedicated leftist movements that resisted Nazism during World War II. They take their democratic liberties very seriously in a way which, unfortunately, Americans, we've never been invaded by a foreign power. We're not as touchy about these sorts of things. And Americans have also been fed on delusions of grandeur. We're all told we can be president and rock stars and millionaires. Europeans don't feel that way. So they want to protect the very normal, ordinary luxuries that they know make life worth living, like vacation time and parental leave and a dignified old age. But Americans, for too long, have been drunk on this idea that, well, working hard is great because eventually maybe I'll be Jeff Bezos. And like Rhett said, I really do think the younger generations are waking up to the fact that that's not going to happen. You're more likely to win the lottery than become the next Steve Jobs, which is to say, not likely at all. And I'm really excited to be living in the United States at a time of the progressive awakening where, hey, maybe we should start to safeguard some of those middle-class liberties as well.
That's such a good point, Jocelyn. And I also want to point out, the truth is you're way more likely to be unhoused or in a more vulnerable population or situation than you are to be even close to the bottom of the 1% in this country, which is, I agree with you, a definitely different way of thinking of things. I also want to bring up, just in my own personal view, we've touched on the different reasons why we think that the United States isn't so outraged by the kind of degrading of our, benefits as the French. And, Linda brought up age, and we brought up our culture in terms of, we just have more work-centric culture. But I also think there's the very real threat of police violence that hangs over this country constantly. Like seeing the French kind of burn down their own cities is really interesting, considering like what happens in this country during peaceful protests, and then obviously protests that get a little more heated, how quickly police resort to extrajudicial killings, essentially. Like it's not even the fear of arrest, it's the fear that you will just be murdered in cold blood on the street by any officer who deems you as a threat. And that's something that's always in the back of my mind, especially when I think about why our populations are so kind of quick to just go along and get along and not really fight for those things. Because here you kind of are fighting with your life. Like people are not afraid to take your life. The police aren't. And that's an important aspect as well, in my opinion.
I had a European friend tell me recently, is like, yeah, whenever I talk to American friends, I just want to be like, are you okay? And like, you feel it. If you spend a lot of time in these, freer European democracies versus America, it's a very different energy. And not always in a good way, right? Europeans can be very like the servers don't care about you. They're getting paid regardless. So I don't want to romanticize it entirely. But in general, Americans do feel much more anxious, much more on edge, also more polite, right? Because of that. But it's not a good thing for people to be in a perpetual state of anxiety because, like you're saying, Tyler, the threat of violence, either economic or police violence, or it's very real here, and people embody that in the way they move through their lives.
Yeah, and I would say that a big reason for the state of perpetual anxiety that so many Americans are in is that because we don't have the same kind of protections that Europeans, especially the French, have, people are just constantly precarious. Even people who are doing well know that they're just one illness, one job loss away from a really bad situation. And so you're just very constantly stressed and knowing that society is not going to be there to catch you if you fall.
And I just want to end this with an observation from a French woman. So I was in France recently for a month to learn French, and I met with my French teacher every morning, which is like midnight here. And we were talking about this, and she said, look, I have some empathy for Americans because I understand that if I felt like I was one job loss, as you said, Linda, away from not having health care, not having housing, I'd probably be more interested in money too. And then she got this like thoughtful look on her face. And then she goes, but I do think that eventually the pursuit of money becomes its own identity. Like even once you're good, you're like, all right, well, now I got to be richer than the next guy because I've been doing this for so long. We've become entirely detached from leisure, from community, from the things that might make life worth living outside of wealth. And so we've become a nation of the very wealthy and those who are trying to get there. But there's so much more to life than any of that.
100% agree. First of all, I'm always jealous of you and your European adventures. But this was a really great conversation. I think I can speak for everyone at Progress America Unfiltered when I say we will be watching the French very closely, hopefully as a predictor of what we may see here or what we could aspire to here. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Thank you, Linda, Rhett, and Jocelyn for weighing in on that. And before we wrap up this episode, we have to give a quick update on our presidential bracket results. We are still doing our March Madness to figure out who the best TV movie president is. So let's see. I think Rhett and I are going to go back and forth. So let's look at the evil bracket. I'll start with the evil bracket. So in the evil bracket, Billy Bob Thornton from Love Actually edged out President Charles Logan from 24 in an upset by a single vote, okay? This is why you need to be voting and you need to take it seriously. Meryl Streep from Don't Look Up also beat Richard Nixon's head from Futurama, 60-40. That's another upset. I think a lot of people were banking on Richard Nixon's head, but I'm here with my girl Meryl, so I don't really mind this one. So that means the evil bracket finals, the voting next week is going to be Billy Bob Thornton in Love Actually versus Meryl Streep in Don't Look Up. So make sure you vote for that. And Rhett, do you want to talk us through the disaster bracket?
Yes, and yes. So for the disaster bracket, we have Jamie Foxx from White House Down upsetting the #1 seed, Bill Pullman from Independence Day. Interestingly, Pullman crushed on Twitter, Jamie Foxx crushed on Instagram, but there were more Instagrammers, so that's why we all got a vote. Harrison Ford from Air Force One defeated Morgan Freeman from Deep Impact by 55-44. And that was a real surprise to me. I was rooting for Morgan Freeman. Haven't seen either of these movies, but love Morgan Freeman, so it's a surprise to me for sure. And now Tyler for our disaster bracket.
So the disaster bracket final, who you're going to be voting on next week, it's going to be Jamie Foxx in White House Down versus Harrison Ford in Air Force One. So good luck voting on that. I don't know who I will pick. That'll be tough. Might have to watch those movies. In the funny bracket, the #1 seed was Terry Crews. And in his debut film role as President Dwayne... Oh, whoops. I lost. Okay, there we go. In his debut role as President Dwayne Elanzado, Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho from Idiocracy. Have not seen that movie, very obviously. And he beat Jack Nicholson in Mars Attacks by a single vote. And Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the #2 seed crushed Peter Sellers as President Merkin Muffy from Dr. Strangelove. So the funny bracket finals is going to be Terry Crews versus Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I've got my money on Julia. I'm not going to lie. But Rhett, let me know how the Hopium bracket is looking.
For sure. So for the Hopium bracket, we have our #1 overall seed, Jed Bartlett played by Martin Sheen from The West Wings. And this guy overtook 24's Dennis Haysbert as David Palmer. So honestly, this is I'm happy with this one because Jed Bartlett was from West Wing, and that is definitely a character that like they played in my government class in high school. So thanks for the government education, President Bartlett. And Michael Douglas's American President defeated Kevin Kline's Dave from Dave. Michael's mother is crying somewhere over this result. Sorry, Michael. I know that was a pain for you to have to let us know that one. And so for the Hopium bracket final, we have the Aaron Sorkin showdown. Jed Bartlett from The West Wing versus Michael Douglas in The American President, because, of course, Sorkin wrote both of these.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting, Sorkin v. Sorkin. I'm very excited to see how this plays out. So now you know who to vote for. You've got next week to vote. Head to our Instagram, head to our Twitter, cast your vote, and we will continue this March Madness. But that being said, thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Progress America Unfiltered, and we will talk to you next time. Bye.